Everyone say hi to the recording. Good morning. Welcome to Florida Center's FASD bi-monthly need to know information on 504 and IEP. Was that good, Jen? All right, so why don't you guys, Bailey and Jen, why don't you guys kick us off and then I'll start.
Kick us off with introductions. Oh, sorry. I'm Bailey Jackson. I am the FASD assistant director at the clinic.
And I'm Jen Worden. I am the parent advocate with the Florida Center's FASD clinic. And we know Amy has got some really great information for us today. And so we are excited to learn about how to help our kiddos in school with 504s and IEPs when we've got some behavioral struggles.
All right, so ladies, Heather and Cynthia, do you want to introduce yourselves or you're good? I don't know how you feel about it. Recording. You're good? Okay.
I'll introduce myself. My name is Heather. I live in the Tampa Bay area and I have 4 adopted kiddos and 1 biological kiddo. And we have neurodiversity across the board in our homes. So my oldest is 15, my youngest is 5, and we've got a little sprinkling of everything. So thank you, Amy.
You'll be young forever. Cynthia, did you want to say something, introduce?
I better. My name is Cindy. Sophia, she'll be 8 next week. And we already raised 4 boys and none of them live here because they're all older. So she's my niece, and with my niece, it's totally different than having even the 4 boys here all at one time. It's a totally different atmosphere in the house, even though nobody's home but her.
Wow.
A lot of fun. We have a lot of fun.
Lots of energy. All right. Well, we are always honored when people Zoom in with us. So thank you for being here. Today is about the behavior problems in the IEP. So, can you give me a little power in the ability to share screens? So I'm always going to defer to Rights Law when it comes to legal issues in the IEP and the 504, so that you also can know and have context for what you're asking for. So this particular page is what you need to know about IDEA, IEPs for children with behavior problems. So this question, where it says help my child has autism, we can replace that, help my child has blank, right? So behaviors are behaviors regardless of labels. But understanding and knowing what the label is helps us understand the behaviors, right? So help my child has a cold and has a behavior is going to be very different than help my child, lives with FASD, right? That and has behavior. So please understand that when we're talking about behaviors, when it comes to the IEP, it's going to be very specified for each family, right? Depending on what that label comes along with. So the next part says sometimes he's disruptive and his behaviors interferes with other children's learning. So this is a really interesting statement because it says he is disruptive and his behaviors interferes with other children's learnings. It doesn't say anything in this particular description about how it interrupts his own, right? So this is like the greater good of the classroom. And then the question, which I think is a really well thought out question, must the IEP team develop a plan to address these behavior problems? So I kind of want to go through the answers because then open it to the floor. And what you do is you insert your own issues going on. And is it relevant? Can you use this information, right? Or what part can you use? So the answer is always a paper trail. So it's probably going to happen again if it happened once, right? I mean, the nature of the labels and the things that our children live with. So you always have to write that letter and request that the IEP team meet and review and revise the child's IEP. I'm going to repeat that again. You always have to write a letter and request. Don't just text it. Don't just make the phone call. You can write the letter and make the request and follow up with a phone call. That's fine, but create a paper trail. That way it's dated and etc. Yeah, Jen.
Amy, I just want to make sure that, so it can be a written letter or it can also be an email, correct?
Yeah.
Okay.
I sure can. Your email is going to timestamp it. So it's a better way to use, it's a better source or tool. All right. So you write the letter, request it. And in light of the behavior issues that led him to have him maybe arrested or kicked out or ISR, in school suspension, or out of school suspension, right? So you want to understand where this behavior is coming from. So your letter should always include relevant information about your child's history and your concerns. So one of the things that we leave out when we write our letters often is we just request the IEP team meet and to revise the IEP based on a particular behavior that you think is going to start again. But you have to go deeper, and providing that relevant information about your child's history and your concerns is everything that we spoke of last week, right? The present levels. So Cynthia, you made a very good comment, and how someone can take up a lot of space, energy in a space, and it's going to happen again. So you have to be prepared for that, right? Well, in a school setting, the spaces look a little different than our home settings, right? And there's so many energies going on in school settings. So I can't emphasize enough that your child's history and your concerns are relevant, but the way to do it is not in a written novella. That's your side job, right? You're writing about your child's experience. Your job is to find 3 bullet points that continue to occur, that you've seen. You want to be clear. The more clear you are, the better the law will support you. All right. So in order to understand the answer, you also, this is where the law comes in for IEPs and what to do when children have disabilities that have behavior problems. So remember, IDA is published in 2006, so it's a little old at this point relative. I mean, I can't believe we're in 2022, right? So it's still relevant. So this is what to do when the child's behavior impedes the child's learning or the learning of other children. Does everyone see where I am? Right here. All right. So this sentence is a really important sentence if you want to write this down in quotes: when the child's behavior impedes the child's learning or the learning of other children, because this conversation is addressing this in a legal manner. All right, so let's start with, if a child's behavior impedes a child's learning or that of others, right? Then the IEP teams base positive behavioral interventions and support on a functional behavior assessment. Is that true? The answer is yeah. Conducting functional behavior assessments precedes developing the positive behavior intervention strategies. So the question is, Heather and Cynthia, do you guys have a BIP in place? Are there any functional behavior assessments that have been done to the BIP is behavior intervention plan? So do your kiddos have either an assessment or a plan in place?
We had one.
Did you say in past tense had?
Had one.
Had.
And her teacher, it wasn't like a she had one in the past in preschool, kindergarten. Then she didn't have it. So it was just like a behavior chart. But
Right.
so this school year, she had a behavior chart, but her teacher took it away a few weeks ago because she hasn't needed it anymore.
Oh, that's good.
Yes. So
Fabulous.
of course, she said it'll come right back if, need be. But that was like you're talking about behavior. I mean, we can talk about this after if you want to keep going, but I
Sure,
want to
sure.
talk about the behavior on the IEP when
Sure.
we're ready to talk.
Absolutely. Yeah. So as Cynthia, as your daughter ages, particularly going into a middle school setting, having a behavior intervention plan that she agrees to prior to behaviors not going well is a better idea than having to be in crisis and create a BIP. So if you can, she has a little bit of a history of needing a behavior chart, et cetera, getting off one, but we all age and we all change. So just keep that in mind. Prevention is better than having to do the intervention, right? We can prevent. All right, good. So does consideration of special factors, which is the next part right here, does consideration of special factors address the behavior needs of children with disabilities, the IEP process? So here's your key, consideration of special factors. And the answer is yeah. Yes, sorry, that was informal. So the IEP team does determine whether a child needs a positive behavior intervention and support, which is, Cynthia, probably the case that's going on right now. She needed the chart, but now, doesn't. If a behavior of a child impedes a child's learning or learning of others, then the IEP team must consider the use of positive behavior supports and other strategies to address that behavior. Now, not all kids have an IEP yet. So we're dealing with that with a couple kiddos that we're working with. They don't even have they don't even have a 504, right? So no one's on board with that kid, right? He's really struggling. So the next question is, if the child's behavior impedes a child's learning or that of others, must the IEP team develop a plan to address the behavior problem, which is very similar to the one before. I just want you to notice the difference. The term is consideration of special factors. So special factors can be lots of things, but that's what this one is addressing. This one is continuing from the original question. Must the IEP develop a plan? The answer is yes, they must. They must develop a plan. If behaviors are impeding learning and their learning of others, they have to include clear strategies, which have to lean and be positive behavior interventions. They have to be supports. So Heather, when you were talking about things that your school, the public school near you, said they couldn't do, it's not true. They have to if a child has an IEP. It's law. The problem is that all schools don't always know the intensity of this. So that's why I don't discourage you from looking at a public, but knowing that they must. Now, if a public school says they cannot do it at their school because of staffing issues and because of lack of resources, et cetera, they must be able then to refer you to a school that can, which can be a private school, by the way. Yeah. And right, we'll stop at that point. Okay. So if the child behavior that impedes learning is not addressed, then the IEP must review and revise it to ensure that the child receives appropriate positive behavior interventions and other strategies. And that doesn't always happen. That's when a school can send out. I think, Jen, you experienced that, right? Yeah, okay. So must school districts train teachers regarding the use of positive behavior interventions and support? Yes. So don't let them say otherwise. Yeah, they have to. School districts must provide teachers with high quality professional development, okay, with scientifically based instructional practices. School districts must ensure that personnel have skills and knowledge necessary to improve the academic achievement and functional performance of children. Each district must ensure that all personnel necessary are appropriately and adequately prepared. It is the law. That's why I said what I said to you, Heather. All right, so we're all in the state of Florida. So this next part, we have these things in the state of Florida. This next statement, must school districts use research-based positive behavior supports? It's a fascinating question. And systematic and individual research-based interventions when addressing behavior needs with children with disabilities with IEPs? Yes, it is the law. They have to ensure that they're using evidence-based or scientifically based research that drives their activities and services, like ABA, like that's researched, right? That would be a research-backed activity service. So you need to know that that is a yes, a hard yes, but this is a hard no in the last one. Must public agencies provide positive behavior interventions and supports for all children identified as having emotional disturbances? Hence the word public agencies. It doesn't say school districts. So the answer is no. It is the role of the IEP team in an individual public school to create a program. But IEP teams don't necessarily have to consider these other supports for a particular group of children outside of the school setting, that if they're using, outside agencies that the school system works with. But the IEP teams do and must consider the use of positive behavior interventions and supports. So those are the big legal yeses and, all yeses and one hard no. Hopefully that clarifies and puts some things in light for you. Yes.
So I'd like to, I don't understand the difference between those last two. So
Yep.
What would be an example of public agencies? Must public agencies provide positive behavioral interventions and support?
Florida Center isn't public. Department of Health.
Okay, but the school. So school districts must, but public agencies are not. Okay.
Yeah.
And I also wanted to clarify, this is only for IEPs. This is not 504s, correct?
Because 504s do not have goals. 504s are the accommodation piece based on, anxieties, based on some sort of, labeling, but it is not the goal-oriented specialized education piece. It is only the accommodation side of it. Correct. Mm-hmm. All right, good questions. I'm going to stop share, Bailey. That's okay. All right. But what I'm going to do is send the link and put the link down here for you so that you can access it when you need it based on and then it also gives you that opportunity to kind of dive and dig a little bit more into rights law, which is always, important to be able to have access to that. So in your chat box, here you go. Yeah. All right. Any other questions? We can talk about individual behaviors if you want, on or off the recording. That's up to y'all, if it'll help other parents.
Amy, I want to add in really quick something that you and I kind of talked about beforehand is, while we're working with the teams, with the schools, trying to find ways to appropriately accommodate and support our kiddos in the classroom. There are some times when we have to admit that there has been damage beyond repair to the relationship with those folks.
Yeah.
And that unfortunately was a case that we ran into.
Yes.
But I can also attest to just how beneficial it is when a school is able to admit that they're not the right place to support your kiddo. And then when they're able to give you a recommendation of somewhere that might be a better suited environment, I encourage the parents that watch this and that hear this to explore those opportunities, because changing my kiddo's school was the absolute best thing that we could have done. He has been able to succeed. He feels supported. He is thriving. He is learning. He is in school. And we were able to just recognize that with the administration and the IEP team that we were working with previously, we weren't going to be able to come to a successful resolution so that my kiddo could be in a good learning place at his old school. So it's just something to keep in mind.
Well, Jen, can you just elaborate on at what point you were like, well, this is, I mean, I remember it, but for everyone else,
Yeah.
At what point was this a no-go?
So Jay struggled really bad with some physical aggression issues. And we had, at the end of one school year, after more than 10 suspension days, a manifestation determination meeting, which we were all able to admit that, yes, his behaviors were a result of his disability. However, there were not other options that the school really had in order to continue supporting him, except for adding in the recommended one-on-one aid. So when that school year ended, we were able to have the one-on-one aid added to his support. And even with the beginning of the next school year, when it started, we still encountered 13 days of out of school suspension in the first 26 school days. And I think at that point was when everybody was really able to recognize that we weren't going to be able to successfully have him stay where he was. And then the recommendation for us ended up being that he went to a school that was set up to support kids with emotional and behavioral needs. And it has been an amazing switch for him. But I mean, ultimately, at the end of the previous school year, like Jay was looking at, legal action against him. And it was just really difficult to feel like I could partner with the folks at his old school. It was really hard to feel like some of the players were on Team J, which is where everybody needed to be to support him. Obviously we'll be coming from different perspectives on how we are part of Team J, but it was probably the best thing that we could have done for him, because he really, really has been able to thrive.
So I think you've said some really important things. I want to pull out some of your comments. One, I want to talk about the word behaviors. So behaviors just don't belong to children. They belong to teens and adults and to seniors, to the human population, to the animal population. And anytime we talk about behaviors, we don't necessarily need to talk about, it doesn't have to be the word negative in front of it as an adjective. It could be a positive, it could be a stable, etc. So I think it's really important to understand that behaviors are windows into our brains and to our sensory system. So I'll repeat that again because I think it's a missing word. Behaviors are windows into our sensory systems, or our nervous systems, which is our sensory world, and how it's conducted. And when we can step back and look at where that behavior came from, we can then create those positive behavior implementations and successes, or resources and tools. But when we're just constantly in this reactive state, it's kind of, well, I would go with the word impossible until you take the I am off, I am possible. And then you can actually start kind of demystifying where that behavior is coming from. I'll go back to that opening line that I said, hi or help, my child has a cold, right? So when your child is getting sick, how it looks, right? They become lethargic, or they stop eating, or they're sleeping more. There's some behavior trigger physically that you notice and you see, And then you're like, oh man, then the sniffles come or the sore throat comes or something comes up. And those were pre-behaviors. The child wasn't trying to feel sick, right? But it happened. This is the same thing when they're frustrated or when they're being bullied or they don't understand something, or maybe they're the slowest reader, right? Behaviors happen. So when we start understanding those behaviors and then really digging into them, you can get to the positive behavior spaces. It's very possible. But without that deeper look in, oh, that's what that means, right? Then, you just keep knocking your head up against the wall. So well said, Jen. Crickets would mean stop recording. We're done.